Can't. Dis vir my 'n besondere voorreg om vandag hier te staan en aan te help wat Can you hear me now? I know the sound man is somewhere adjusting the sound. Thank you very much for your patience. Um, just one or two things before we start formally. Please, can I ask you to put your phones on silence? We are recording this and broadcasting out on YouTube, so kindly put it on silence. Diegene wat 'n bietjie lig nodig het, kan na die atrium toe beweeg. If you feel a bit nervous and need some fresh air, please feel free to join anybody in the atrium. The toilets are straight through at the back here if you need that. And then finally, of course, we may possibly be subject to load shedding at about 4 o'clock, so keep your fingers crossed that that won't happen. But if that happens, we will change gears. The program for today is, of course, a special tribute to a very special person, and I'm honored to, as I said earlier, to lead the proceedings. I will ask those who are taking part in the proceedings and saying a few words, please stick to our time rule, otherwise we might be here when they lock the gates. So, ek het al klaar almal welkom geheet. Welkom julle almal. Marilyn and I were a private MM club, and I'm afraid I'm the only remaining member. Marilyn Martin, my friend, sometime art collaborator, one-time director of the South African National Gallery. Marilyn was a very private person, a good friend, challenging and caring, a single mother of note, and a loving grandmother. Marilyn was also a high-profile public person, forthcoming in her culture politics, diplomatic in her dealings with royalty, officials, art notables, staff, the homeless around the gallery. That was Marilyn Martin. Her name, her time as director here in this building started in 1990, and she led the revolution in local art. One day, when more sober perspectives reflect on those years, her role both in the changes here, the establishment of IZICO, but also in the grander scheme of South African art, will get the golden acknowledgement it deserves. I am convinced that her footsteps on this parquet floor and through these halls add up to more than could be counted steps in her entire life. She was the director of the South African National Gallery and inhabited it fully until there was no director anymore. Perhaps being the last one, ironically, is her legacy too. Irony also plays out in the enthusiastic way she contributed to the founding of the flagship concept of IZICO, and when she retired in a bureaucratic title in that organization. But today, for a few moments on this floor, in this hall, let us remember, let us pay tribute to Marilyn Martin, my friend, your friend, a unique cultural pioneer, activist, the mother of Catherine and Ziad and his wife Shireen, and grandmother of Leila and Rios. And on that note, I've asked my friend Bongani to say a few words.
Thank you, Program Director. Ladies and gentlemen, and especially friends and to the family of Marilyn, welcome to the South African National Gallery, a space, as the program director said, she occupied with high level of professionalism and pride. Before I say more, I would like also to extend Roxana's Omar apologies. She received a call that her mother is not well, so she had to go to Durban to take care of her mother. In the space that we are in today, it is a space that Marilyn directed, also crafted a very firm strategy for the gallery. She led a vibrant programming, particularly for exhibitions, acquisitions, education programs, and related strategic activities of the National Gallery, and later on of the art collections. When in 2011, I was interviewed for the position of the executive director for core functions, Marilyn was the panel member. She questioned us, family, on progressive acquisition strategies, transformation, race relations, and conservation. Even as a panel member, she was very probing. We responded, and then she also responded. Later on, when I served with her in the core functions committee, I realized and I've learned to appreciate her independent mind. Never shy to tell you that she disagreed with you where she did. When her term of office came to an end as the council member for Izigo, she called myself and Roxana and introduced a project that she was doing with Anna. They were doing a history of the National Gallery. Later on, she came again and said she has decided to write her own book. She wanted to be very independent, very critical of Izigo, and we should also expect nothing else but constructive criticism. True to her wit, she published Between Dreams and Realities. She was very good in criticizing Izigo and also in pointing out where things needed to be improved. She was also very vocal on how Izigo was pouring and also was living in a world that was not in touch with reality. My last communication with her, she was asking me about a project we called I Sang 150. Last year, the National Gallery was supposed to celebrate 150 years in terms of the collection. But we were not able to do so because of a number of challenges and also the number of limitations. Quite interestingly, a colleague told me that when she took over as the director of this gallery, she closed it for a particular period because she wanted it to breathe and to be renewed. She was looking forward to seeing and constructively engage with us as far as I Sang 150 and the exhibition that we are planning. To the family, please rest assured that Marilyn's legacy will remain part of our DNA. We know that we'll never be able to live to the high bar that she had for the gallery. However, our archives are rich with what she wanted to achieve. And these spaces are a testimony to what she would prefer to see. Only time will tell. Please know that our thoughts, our memories, and and accept our deep condolences. To you, ladies and gentlemen, once again, Welcome to Izzigo, South African National Gallery. Thank you.
In case anyone doesn't know who I am, I'm Philippa Duncan. I'm the co-chairperson of the Friends of the National Gallery. Unlike the Oscars, sorry, I'm short. Happens to some of us. I know I'm under the whip here, as Bailon just reminded us. Unlike the Oscars, we're under the whip regarding the amount of time we're allowed to take up at the podium today, so I will keep this brief. On behalf of the Friends, and everyone here today and watching online, thank you to Ziad and Catherine for letting us share their both during her extraordinary life and today. Thank you also to everyone at Iziko, Bongani, thank you for being here, for making Room 1 available so that we could be here today at MM's beloved National Gallery. Team Marilyn, thank you for the brainstorming sessions and WhatsApp messages which kept all of the plans on track. And of course to Marilyn, who I'm quite sure is keeping an eye on all of this and eyebrows slightly lifted, nodding her approval. Thank you for always nurturing the Friends and encouraging our role in assisting the gallery wherever we could. Salute.
If Marilyn were here today, she would greet you all with a warm good afternoon, goeiemiddag, molweni, and salam alaikum. I'll do that today in her honor as her daughter, Catherine. I need to start off by thanking everybody who has reached out to the family, offering their love and support. It has been overwhelming, but comforting too. To my wonderful friends, family, near and far, thank you for being there for me in the most difficult time in my life. You know who you are, and I love you. We also miss today many of Marilyn's nearest and dearest, for whatever reason, who couldn't be here, but will still be able to enjoy this tribute online. Technology. Joanne, Emma, Philippa, my sincerest thanks for being Team Marilyn. I appreciate you giving of your time, your resources, and phenomenal organizational skills. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible. Joanne, or Mrs. Duggan, as Marilyn affectionately called you, in the last weeks, you were there for her, and also for me, and I will always remember that. Liefste Malfijn, julle het 'n wonderlike vriendskap geniet. Dankie vir vandag, ons waardeer jou. You will hear about Marilyn's professional achievements today, and she did so much. What a legacy she leaves behind. Of course, as her daughter, I'm in awe of her accomplishments, all while being a single mother, raising two sometimes impossible children on her own in the early days. My mother's career and love of art and architecture were her passion, but her children and later the adored grandchildren always came first. She loved us unconditionally. Sunday lunch was the highlight of her every week, a chance to prepare delicious meals for her family and enjoy precious time spent together. She baked too, and her rusks even have an international following. A more devoted, supportive, present, and loving parent I could not have wished for. She found the balance between work and family and excelled at both. My mama was my soulmate, my confidant, my companion, and my safe place, and I was hers. We shared an unbreakable bond. Being raised by her was a privilege, And as an adult, I value all the people and places she exposed me to and all that she taught me. Her joy for life, laughter, and occasional madness will be missed, but forever in my wonderful memories of her. To me, she was perfect in every way, my everything.
Thank you. Our dearest Nana, you were the dearest mom-in-law who could always be counted on to listen, to advise, to comfort, to help. You always looked the picture of perfection and elegance. You filled our lives with so much beauty, grace, and love. You were the epitome of what an amazing grandmother was. Thank you for always showing up. You were at every prize giving, sitting in the audience, cheering us on, no matter what marks we got. You took me to hockey matches and stayed to watch, even though I was terrible at it. You are a safe place, free of judgment, and full of love, care, and support. You were and always will be our biggest supporter and motivator. You were never just our grandmother, but our guardian, our friend, and our inspiration. You have shaped us into the people we are today. Thank you for trying to broaden our experiences and education. I find it fitting that our final outing was to Zeitz, as you always find a way of incorporating your interests and professional life into our personal lives. But you did it with the utmost understanding and consideration. You took us to art galleries, but did not expect us to like all the art. You took us to operas, but did not mind that we fell asleep most of the time. For you, it was more about exposing us to unique experiences and spending time together. And we were happy to tag along and share those moments with you, which we will cherish forever. I keep trying to think of my favorite memory of you, but there are countless glimpses that remind me of the incredible woman you were. From hopping around the house like a bunny on Easter, to teaching us weird and wonderful things at lunch, to you singing in multiple languages to us on our birthdays, to the countless meals you made for us, and to watching sport together. You have left enormous shoes to fill, but I promise that Riaz and I will use every inch of our being to make you proud. I'm sorry that you won't be at our weddings. I'm sorry that our children will never get to meet you and share laughs with you around the table. And I'm sorry that you won't be there to watch us graduate. But until we meet again, love you always and forever.
I am the other Heather, and I'd like to talk about my other mother and self-appointed fairy godmother to my daughter Kate and the special role she played in my life. I'll start with a story about a Facebook post. I posted recently about having a phobia about the placement of commas and full stops in bibliographies since History of Art 1, and a conversation ensued on Facebook between Hannah LaRue and others. A few days later, the phone rang. The post had been shared by Catherine manually with Marilyn, and we had a really great laugh together. When I arrived in first year at Wits, I thought I could cruise History of Art, an introduction to modern art, as a repeat of matric art. The lecturer was Marilyn Martin, a beautiful, poised woman who often wore a red poncho and drove a Beetle. Lesson 1 was quickly learned: attention to detail, comments made in her beautiful cursive, and yes, those corrections to the bibliography. Her lectures were meticulously prepared, and she made art alive. What she did was raise the bar, teaching us structure and placing architecture within art. She played a unique role in the department. She connected me into another world. I was so pleased to have been able to share my completed PhD book with her on my last trip to Cape Town on April 22nd. Marilyn cared for her students, and in her next iteration as SANG director, she cared about the people she worked with. It says a great deal about her personality, her presence, and the meaning she brought to our lives that former students from Wits in the 1980s recall the role Marilyn played fondly, and in many cases remained in touch with her. Marilyn referred to her architectural children. We were heartbroken when she took up the position as director of SANG, but what a contribution she made. She understood what was required of institutional transformation before the phrase became fashionable. She acted with integrity, doing the right thing, even if this wasn't easy. I was lucky to be involved in 2 of the architectural exhibitions at the gallery, lending a hand. The Indabeli exhibition, curated by Peter Rich, Looking through the photos recently, I marvel at how she handled the mayhem and chaos that descended on the gallery and the joy on her face at the opening. The exhibition of the life work of Pancho Geresh, her last exhibition as director, brought her two worlds together. What a special event that was. And when the evening ended, we went home and she tucked me up into bed with a hot water bottle. I had traveled to Cape Town with what was diagnosed as pneumonia. Marilyn was excellent at keeping in touch, in being a friend. I can hardly imagine my world without her. My last exchange on WhatsApp when I was traveling and she was in hospital was when we exchanged a hola from Picasso in Spain, and she asked me to light a candle for her chico favorito, Pascual. She often spoke of her friends, the other Heather, in the States, Diana and Craig in Wales, Louis and Hardy, Vota. My condolences to you all. I will always treasure our friendship. Marilyn's beauty shone from within through her smile. Often a wry smile would appear and then her raised eyebrows before breaking into a smile. And she could smile on the phone. Marilyn was always busy with a project. She loved dark chocolate, in fact, any chocolate. Marilyn took pleasure in the simple things in life, and today was always a good day. I will take that life lesson forward. Marilyn will always have a special place in my heart. Kate says she'll always be my fairy godmother. I'll remember her when eating dark chocolate, Lint, when I hear Marianne Faithfull and Ishmael Law singing Without Blame. But the single most important thing in Marilyn's life was her family, Catherine, Reyes, Leila, and Ziad, whom she loved unconditionally and was so proud of. Her greatest joy was Sundays with her family. I know your hearts are broken. It was too soon, but it was quick. Farewell, Marilyn.
Thank you, Heather. The architectural connection, of course, lingered with her forever. And the last book that she was working on was the famous or infamous book about Broekies lace, Victorian Broekies lace, which became the sort of ghost book of Marilyn's life in many ways. But she did publish two magnificent books before that, including, as Bongani Clover mentioned, the alternative history of the South African National Gallery, which is a major, interesting book to read. And of course, she is just finished the final biography of one of my great heroes of the art world, Kevin Atkinson, something that I'm looking forward to with a great deal of anticipation. And the book is being published by Robin Stewart Clark, and he sent the following tribute to Marilyn. Over the last 10 years or so, Marilyn Martin became an integral part of my working life in publishing. We first met briefly at the launch of the late Angela Reid's Moses Claudy's book at the South African National Gallery in 2010. That meeting led to a professional working relationship that grew over time into a friendship. It was not a social or familial friendship, but rather one of mutual trust. Working with authors is invariably a difficult balance of expectations versus reality. Marilyn, however, was different. A consummate professional with an aesthetic sensibility that was flawless. Marilyn knew what the publication needed, how it should be done, and how it should look, but was always open to suggestion, never losing sight of who it was for. Yes, she could be a stickler for detail, but always with good cause. It is such circumspection that elevates a book to the level of a definite authoritative work. Such was her integrity that second best for Marilyn was simply not acceptable nor negotiable. It has been a rare privilege to work with somebody like Marilyn, Robin writes. Every time we met, I learned something new, if not about art, about her or me or life in general. I shall miss our chats, her interest, enthusiasm, and intellect, but I shan't forget her chuckles. We have lost not only a parent, grandparent, friend, or colleague, but also a dedicated and irreplaceable guardian of South African art and culture. Thank you. Emma Bedford, ladies and gentlemen.
We are going to look at some slides with this presentation. Are we? Catherine, Ziad, family, friends, colleagues, and associates, we've come together today to celebrate the life of Marilyn Martin. I've been asked to speak about her achievements at the National Gallery and within Iziko. I'd been at the gallery for 9 years prior to her appointment, and we worked closely together in those early years and after the gallery became part of Iziko Museums in 2001. It's my pleasure to share with you some of the many highlights during her 18-year directorship of the South African National Gallery from 1990 to 2008, such as the Picasso and Africa exhibition in 2006. South Africa was undergoing a process of radical change towards a broader democracy in the early 1990s. One of Marilyn's first acquisitions was Jane Alexander's Butcher Boys, a powerful evocation of the dehumanizing forces of apartheid. In 1992, we launched our newsletter called Bonani, a Xhosa word meaning many people seeing, and we adopted a new logo representing an African design on a classical column. Marilyn initiated lively public discussions around the role of the museum, its context, and its wider audience, and the National Gallery collaborated with organizations such as the Community Arts Project, the Mayibuyi Center for History and Culture in South Africa, and the Jewish Museum. Picturing Our World was a broad-based, collaborative project curated by Marilyn with Emile Maurice and Joanne Duggan for the Grahamstown Festival in 1993. It challenged both the picturesque image of Cape art and limited notions of community art, and later toured to the Standard Bank Gallery in Johannesburg and the National Gallery in Cape Town. Together with our colleagues, we committed ourselves to questioning narrow definitions of art and artists, broadening the exhibitions and collections policies, and opening the gallery to wider participation. Ezakwantu, beadwork from the Eastern Cape, opened by the Honorable Albertina Sisulu in 1993, explored not only the aesthetic appeal of dress, but its cultural and political dimensions. The exhibition, featuring historical footage of Nelson Mandela arriving in full Tembu regalia at his 1962 trial, was a great success in Germany, making the front page news headlines. On return to South Africa, Ezakwantu was loaned to the Albany Museum in Grahamstown, where it remained for over a year. In 1993, Marilyn curated her first exhibition at the National Gallery entitled Affinities, drawing on works from the permanent collection to explore the ideas and similarities between past and present, and between African traditions and Western art. Our exhibitions caught the attention of significant international museum directors and curators. Jean-Hubert Martin from the National Museum of African and Oceanic Art in Paris, who later went on to curate the groundbreaking Magicien de la Terre, was captivated by what he called the iridescently colored textiles made in local communities, which are hung right next to paintings. Achille Bonito Oliva, the artistic director of the 1993 Venice Biennale, also visited the gallery and praised both Ezakwantu and Affinities as exhibitions illustrating relationships and cross-pollination between Western European and African art. He maintained both would give him much food for thought regarding his theories about the interdependence among cultural languages. As a result, no doubt, of this visit, South African art was included in the 1993 Venice Biennale, where it was well received and later exhibited at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam on request of their director. In the exhibition Igugu La Mandebele, beadwork was exhibited within its historical and cultural context and on the walls as well as contemporary art. The artists who produced some of these exquisite items of wearable art were invited to design and paint the exhibition spaces and to bring their cultural traditions of dance, song, and prayer into the museum. Musuku, Golden Links with Our Past, a groundbreaking exhibition which brought the precious gold rhino of Mapungubwe out of its deep storage where it had languished since the 1930s and not been seen publicly, was curated by Carol Kaufman and Irene Mafune, the first Black woman archaeologist, with the support of Marilyn and our board chair, Karen Skavran. We took South African art to the world, and at the invitation of top artists and in collaboration with major international museums, we were able to bring great shows home, such as this, the first large-scale Willem Kentridge Museum exhibition in South Africa. With the establishment of IZICO in 2001, Marilyn and I worked closely with our team of curators, exhibition designer, and conservator to set up new structures, devise policy, and curate exciting exhibitions and programs within IZICO, across the country and abroad. Let's not forget that the name IZICO came from one of our gallery meetings where our art educator, Vuile Vuia, suggested IZICO, a Xhosa word for the hearth, or the place where people gather to share and exchange ideas. The revisions, catalogue, and exhibition curated by Hayden Proud provided an extraordinary overview of one of the most exciting collections of contemporary Southern African art, with its compelling images of Black experience, solidarity, and subjectivity during the late colonial and apartheid years. From 1994, the world opened up for South Africa. The ways in which our transition to democracy could be read in the visual arts created global interest and a demand for South African art abroad. And the South African National Gallery could fulfill that ambassadorial role with exhibitions, publications, lectures, public programming, and conference papers. South African art was in such demand and it spoke so powerfully about a changing world that Tracy Rose's The Kiss featured on the cover of an international publication about international contemporary art. You'll notice that the artist is sitting on the lap of her New York gallerist, who sits on the plinth in our gallery. The work was made possible through Marlene Dumas' generous donation of her Prince Bernhard Fund Award to spend on any project of her choice, and she chose us. The National Gallery benefited from extraordinary donations, such as Dumas' gift in 2003 of The Next Generation, and with the support of local partners like the Standard Bank, we were able to curate significant exhibitions like this for Marlene, who currently has a major exhibition at Palazzo Grassi in Venice, as many of you would know. Marilyn Martin was a keen strategist, capable of understanding the needs of the museum and its audience, of visualizing a new future, and of inspiring her team and the broad public for arts and culture. Artists and academics of the caliber of Bongi Dlomo Matloa, David Kolowani, Neville Dubois, and Lionel Davis served on the National Gallery's board, chaired by Karen Skavran, and on the Acquisitions Committee, which was chaired by Jane Taylor. If ever you needed something done, swiftly, efficiently, and thoroughly, you'd want Marilyn Martin on your side. Like a tug maneuvers an ocean liner out of the harbor, she could move the IZICO Museums of Cape Town flagship, and anyone for that matter, by the force of her conviction and the power of her arguments. As you've heard, she was also indefatigable, working ceaselessly and tirelessly on what might be called her passion projects. And at the time of her passing, she was steeped in the new Kevin Atkinson project. A world without Marilyn is a difficult one to imagine, but her legacy remains, as do the consequences of her rock-solid determination to make a difference. Her life, her passions, her energy live on in our acquisitions, publications, and in the memories that we cherish. Our love and thoughts remain with her family and with all whose lives she touched, and that's a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. That was a very valuable contribution, and it brought back wonderful memories for me of 2 decades of adventure. Thank you very much for that. This tribute is from Pam Lara, Emerita from the Brandeis University, which I'll read. Marilyn's death came as a tremendous shock to me. She had emailed me during the week about reviewing a manuscript. This is the Atkinson project, and mentioned in passing that she was going in for surgery shortly. I learned of her untimely and unexpected death before I had even completed the review. Marilyn has been a friend and a mentor since we met in 2000. My first thought was how beautiful she was. However, her depth of knowledge and commitment to South African art soon came to the fore, and we hatched the idea of bringing an exhibition to the Rose Art Museum at Brandeis University, where I was teaching at the time. Marilyn guided me through the permanent collection at ITZICO, patiently countering my ignorant first impressions and provided me with the basic knowledge needed to bring the exhibition to fruition. Coexistence, Contemporary Cultural Production in South Africa, opened at the Rose in 2003 and returned to ITZICO in 2004. Marilyn's catalogue essay remains an essential introduction to South African art and art history. We stayed in touch thereafter, and my yearly visits to Johannesburg often included a visit to Cape Town. In addition to providing lodging in a beautiful home, Marilyn drove me to all the exhibits in the Greater Cape Town area, continuing to educate me decades after our first meeting. I will miss my gracious, generous, and brilliant friend. Thank you. This tribute, of course, reminds me, she mentions the catalogue essay in this particular incident, but I think it struck me thinking about Marilyn and all the essays that she's written over the years to catalogues and publications and articles, how she actually wrote in a way that people could follow and understand and be convinced. It's magical to return to those essays now, whether it's Marlene Dumas or Picasso, how authoritative they were, but also how accessible they were. And on that note, may I please ask Joanne.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to put your notes aside here. I'll start reading these tributes. I must say that I find the thought of this afternoon unimaginable. But here we are, and we are celebrating Marilyn. My name is Joanne Duggan. I was very lucky to be here in the 1980s when Marilyn arrived at SANG, and to have worked with her for a period of about 6 or 7 or 8 years. And then in recent years to work with her on the Kevin and Patricia Atkinson Trust. and I feel very privileged to call her a friend. It's wonderful to see so many people here today, but I see everyone is sitting very still and very quiet. When I came here on Wednesday afternoon to see, do a site check with all our wonderful technical team, who you can see are dotted all around, keeping an eye on us, this place was very quiet. There was one ladder in it, there was a bucket of paint in it, and I thought, well, they're never going to manage to get this ready, but they did. But as I stood in this very empty space, I remembered another occasion. It was the opening of the Lappi project. Now, those of you who may have traveled a long way with the gallery might remember the Lappi project. Emma and I at that point were swapping jobs and having babies, so she didn't include it in her speech. But it was a project where we had a lot of different people from Cape Town making pictures of Cape Town as they knew it. We had prisoners, we had domestic workers, we had lace-making aunties, we had artists, we had craftspeople. And the opening was unlike anything we'd ever had at the gallery. People came carrying banners, they came singing, they processed, marching into the front door here and claiming the space in a way no one had ever claimed it before, singing their way all around the gallery and returning. And I will never forget the look on Marilyn's face that day. It was pure bliss, pure joy. She was excited. This was the gallery of her dreams, a space that had previously been regarded as an elite, closed space was being reclaimed. Anyway, I don't want to talk about sang because I think Emma has done that wonderfully eloquently. I also am going to start off by saying I don't want to talk about something else, but I said that for the record, I think we needed to include it. People have spoken about Marilyn's contribution to the life, arts and culture, heritage in South Africa. But just looking at the other organizations with which she was involved and made a contribution to, I think we should just name them because it gives a sense of the broadness of her contribution. If we think of organizations like the Arts and Culture Trust, the National Arts Council, the South African Heritage Resources Agency, the Roland and Letta Hill Trust, the Southern African Postal Stamp Committee, she helped choose stamps and guide the direction of the stamps for almost a decade, I think. The Standard Bank Art Collection, the Fine Arts Fierce, the University of Cape Town, and of course the Alliance Française, amongst others. She fitted a lot into her life, and she did that while remaining and being a very strong mother and later a grandmother. I think that she had the most enormous energy, intellectual energy, physical energy, and an enormous capacity to love and to give. When I think of Marilyn, I want to talk now to her as a friend, and I want to talk to her identity as a friend. She was both a guardian and a champion of her friends. Long ago, she told us that she was determined to honor a few of her friends whose legacies and contribution to the arts she felt had been very underrated. Amongst these, I think we've heard mention of Pancho Geddes, Neville DeBow, and Kevin Atkinson. And Marilyn knew that the best way she could honor those people was to make sure that their works were brought to the public attention. And she did this through the exhibitions she curated, the articles she wrote, and the enormous energy she put into promoting those. And we only have to look at the enormous contribution she's made to the Kevin and Patricia Atkinson Trust to see that today. And she threw herself wholeheartedly into all of those activities. Marilyn was also always the compassionate friend. Someone spoke earlier about her homeless people, but she used to make sure that those homeless people had a meal every Christmas and other meals and were helped out. And she must be one of the few directors of a national institution who would be yelled at as she walked in by a very drunken Maria, say, Marilyn, and waving her down. They were a regular feature, and Marilyn was happy to live side by side with them and to nurture them, to nurture, to nourish, to care for them as she cared for everybody else. I think someone spoke about royalty, whether it was a president, whether it was a DAC official, whether it was anybody else, she would give them the same degree of care. And with her friends and the contribution that she's made to the legacies of those people, she did it because she believed that that is what friends do for friends. We look after them, we guard them in their lives, and we guard their legacies. And I think that we are all the richer for it. She's also the compassionate friend who kept packets of biscuits in her car. And you know how most of us, when we get to the traffic light, we roll up the window and we look ahead. Well, Marilyn didn't. She would roll the window down and she would hand out biscuits to everybody who stopped by. And I think it's that incredible heart in a very small body and a strong mind that was a completely unique contribution to life. Above all, as a friend, Marilyn practiced kindness. And she was never the needy friend, the one who, when the phone rings, you think, oh no, what is she going to want now? She was the friend who took you into a new adventure. She would plunge you headlong into a new adventure. Sometimes it was an intellectual adventure, sometimes it was another. I can remember going with Marilyn up very dark stairways to the tops of very dark buildings to confer with people in the early years of the 90s. Very brave, completely circumspect. And I'm going to tell a story which I hadn't intended to, but just to illustrate Marilyn's bravery. And I think this was Hayden proud. Hayden, wherever you are, I quote this often when I speak of Marilyn. When the AWV invaded the gallery and smashed the sculptures, Peel Kop, because they felt it was an insult to their leaders, Marilyn accosted in the parking lot with Hayden standing next to her. And afterwards he said to us, underneath that very little skirt is the biggest pair of balls in Cape Town. And I will never forget, for me, that really epitomized it. But sorry, I'm going over my time. I just want to speak a little bit about Marilyn in the last days because I think it epitomizes her qualities as a friend. I would speak to her on the phone or on WhatsApp and I would say, isn't there anything you need? When someone is not well, you want to do something, you want to give something, you want to be there for them. She would always say, no, everything I have, everything I need, everything I want is right here. My family love me, my family are supporting me, my friends are loving me, I have everything I need. But she made 3 exceptions. She said to me one day, the only thing I need today, but Catherine's bringing it, is a packet of Quality Street chocolates. So I said, well, and she said, I don't feel like eating, but I do feel like giving them to the nurses because she said they come here with such compassion and they treat me with such kindness that I like to just give them a little something to make their day better. The other thing, which was quite a strange thing, was she was moved into a room where she had no Wi-Fi. And for Marilyn, that was like cutting an umbilical cord. She couldn't communicate with people because her access to the world through her cell phone had been cut. And I said to her, Marilyn, I can just, with a click of a button, send airtime to you. And she said, please do, because then I can keep in touch with everybody. I can keep in touch with the people I love. I can keep in touch with the people I know love me. That meant more to her than books to read or anything else. And the third thing, she sat in her bed, or she lay in her bed, and she thought, what do I need to do to get the Kevin book finished? Because she was determined that no matter what happened, it was going to be finished before she started any form of treatment. And from her bed, she organized peer reviews to be conducted. She did everything that was necessary to make that book print ready. And she did it because she knew she needed to finish that tribute to her friend. That is what she did, and that is who she was. She was a consummate professional. She was a true friend. And I think it's been a very hard couple of weeks for everybody, for Marilyn's family. I think it has been devastating. For her friends, I think it has been a very heart-sore time. And I think we need to all take comfort in the fact that knowing Marilyn died as she lived. She was feisty to the end. She was absolutely serene and at peace. And she died with grace and with dignity in her own bed as she wished. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jan. That was very beautiful. I applied for a job at the South African National Gallery in 1994, personal assistant to the director. Marilyn conducted the interview and I started the next day. I did not have the right clothes. She set an impossible example. I was terrible at my job. She was patient. She fixed all the minutes I took really poorly with a red pen. She recognized my weaknesses and focused on my strengths and allowed me to do more publicity where I showed greater capacity. That was her strength. She saw the potential in people. Marilyn then was juggling very many balls. Only one of them was a process of restructuring South Africa's national museums. Her opinions on that process is well documented. She was not afraid to point out failures and the hopelessly inadequate amount of funding that had been set aside for this very necessary project. My knowledge on art was limited. She encouraged learning. She allowed me to loan art magazines from the library. I developed an interest in photography. She allowed me to select images for the articles she wrote for Revue Noire. I left SANG in 1997, prepared for a career in the art world. That was her doing. We remained in contact. I leaned on her for guidance. Her door was always open. Her advice sound. For us here today, we have lost a mentor, a friend, a colleague, an acquaintance. The grand dame of the art world has left the building. My deepest condolences to Ziad, his wife, and their children. I heard a lot about you, but we have never met. But I have known Catherine, and I know that you have lost your rock. There is no cure for grief, it only drags on. Grief is not a shadow that will pass. It will require seasons, and many of them. I know there's a gaping hole in your heart, but you are through your mother. Her strength is inside you. Stuff that hole with all the memories that she has left. There are so many. She made sure of that. Thank you. Farewell.
Thank you, Heidi. And Joanne reminded me of two things. The one is photography, and the other one is about spiritual caring. And I was extremely honored. I just remembered that I worked with Marilyn in the early 90s, where we brought this grand exhibition, photographs of 8 victims to the National Gallery through the Terence Higgins Trust in London. It was a wonderful experience at the time. The next tribute is from one of Marilyn's friends who was always very special to her. And it goes back to an architectural connection of the time. This is from a dear friend, Wouter Gildenhuys. Ek het Marilyn die eerste keer in Johannesburg ontmoet toe Catherine 8 jaar oud was. By die eerste vergadering van Save the Colosseum campaign. I remember that extremely well as well. They didn't succeed, of course, saving the Colosseum, and they didn't succeed in saving the Art Deco in Sea Point as well, except that Marilyn insisted that the murals come to the National Gallery, and they were out here for a while after the building was demolished. Anyway, back to Wouter. Wouter sê, die campaign het ons verloor, maar ek en Marilyn het 'n vriendskap van meer as 40 jaar gewen. As ek reg onthou, het Marilyn 'n swart en wit gestreepte broekpak aangehad. It was love at first sight. Ek het eers uit Johannesburg vertrek om as lektor te werk by ML Sultan en is later aangestel as hoof van die departement van argitektuur en van die departement van stads- en streeksbeplanning. Marilyn is met 'n tyd as direkteur van die Suid-Afrikaanse Nasionale Kunstmuseum aangestel en het veral belangrike werk rondom die ouer daar gedoen. Sy het byvoorbeeld belangrike werk rondom fotografie gedoen en MIV bewustheid aangewakker, like I just told you. The little beaded signal didn't leave a jacket ever, the HIV awareness. Daar's baie storieetjies skryf Wouter, wat ek kan vertel. Soos die keer toe sy by my kom kuier het in Durban en niks warm ingepak het nie, want ek het sê dit nie nodig nie. Die week daarna was dit ijskoud in Durban en sy het die hele week in my swart jas deurgebring. Marilyn was altyd my grootste ondersteuner en kritikus van my verskeie projekte wat ek oor die jare aangepak het. Totsiens my liewe vriendin, min het ek geweet, die afskeid is so naby. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Balon Sundry. I'm going to speak quickly because I won't make this in under 3 minutes. My connection to Marilyn Martin goes back quite far to before I was born. And when I last checked, I was born quite a long time ago, according to today's standards. My father came to Cape Town in the 1950s and met Marilyn in the 60s. She frequented his restaurant La Perla in Vatican Street in Cape Town. They had many friends in common, artists, but also a wider circle. In the pre-television days, Cape Town had a very vibrant social scene. People dressed up and went out far more frequently. The city was cosmopolitan, and it attracted many international musicians, actors, and performers to its world-class theater scene. Some of those theaters were knocked down in the 60s. This all made for a good night out, and by all accounts, Marilyn, when she was in town, was not entirely absent from this sybaritic social scene. Third-hand evidence also points to the fact that Marilyn was not unattractive. And combined with her charm, style, and sophistication, she was never short of an invitation. And on the subject of invitations, my mother coincidentally recently came across a note from Marilyn dating back to the 1970s. By this stage, I had already been born, and Marilyn was coming to dinner with some important American guests. I vaguely recall the well-dressed foreigners, the sea breeze, the record player playing, the cocktails, the perfume, and then abruptly being sent to bed. My brother and I had just discovered the attention one could get from innocent pranks, such as throwing peach pips onto the occupants of the convertibles driving past beneath our balcony. So when I was sentenced to sleep, I made my way via the backyard into the kitchen and emptied a packet of Cerebros salt into my mother's gourmet soup that was bubbling on the stove. And my brother and I then sat in the study, watching the expressions on the diners' faces as they tucked in. The next day, my mother received a bouquet and this card from Marilyn saying, "To the salt tree, Mrs. Sundry, thank you for a wonderful evening." Once we opened SMAC, our gallery, I started connecting with Marilyn more directly, and we did quite a few important projects, including touring Albert Adams' exhibition and a book, as well as the unfinished Kevin Atkinson project, which is almost done. Marilyn was fiercely loyal, as you've heard, to the artists that she had grown to know and respect over the years, and was determined to do everything she could to do them justice. We loved every minute of working with her, including the Kate Godkins exhibition that we did in Hermanus. I did warn Marilyn and Melvin that Hermanus is not Berlin, but they assured me that it is the next big thing, and the jury's still out on that one, but a prominent South African gallery that represents a very famous Johannesburg artist has recently had a pop-up gallery in the Hamptons. So you never know, Hermanus could be next. I always used our meetings to try and get juicy information about the old days. At one of our last meetings, Marilyn brought me photographs of Le Ricci, one of my father's old restaurants where Kevin Atkinson had done the art for the whole place, big, impressive, three-dimensional metal reliefs. They were really cutting edge for that time. And, you know, it is no secret, I personally do love a bit of art world gossip. In my defense, you know, it's not the same as normal gossip. It's far more avant-garde than the kind of thing you'll see in the Huisgenoot. So in confidence, Marilyn shared some real beauties with me. I urged and begged her for years for a Vanity Fair style expose, similar to Truman Capote's unfinished novel, Answered Prayers, where his naming and shaming of New York society ruffled so many feathers that it could fill every pillow in every Togo sun in Africa. Instead of the memoirs, Marilyn wrote a serious history about the National Gallery. I was very disappointed. This resource is obviously very useful and important to scholars and academics, but for the rest of us, you know, the Skinner is lost. Unless an unlabeled package has arrived in the holding cell of Julian Assange in London, in which case, julle sal moet pas op. Many people have spoken and will speak about Marilyn's contribution and impact to the art world and beyond, especially the role that she played in a very difficult time and complicated period in the country's history. For me, I remember the person, unique, elegant, warm, a strong, intelligent woman with an undeniable presence. You could not help but notice when she walked into a room. She had the strength to maintain her grace and poise even when things were not going well. You would never be able to tell. Marilyn was one of a kind. Everyone at our gallery worked with her, Jean Butler, myself, my family. We simply want to remember her as a person, as a human being, someone who possessed the rare, intangible quality which makes them special and unforgettable. Thank you.
I think today was always going to be difficult for all of us here. I think for our family, the emotional loss has been quite hard to deal with. After a few days of sort of like the mind settling, I think what scared me more was who we'd be speaking about. So when Catherine and I were younger, it's not that long ago, one of my fondest memories when we were like really, really small was being dragged to exhibitions and galleries and, you know, a little bit like she did with her grandkids. My mom was a very impressive woman without necessarily wanting to be impressive. There's so many things I'd like to say today, but I think the most relevant, because everybody's speaking today, I thought the most relevant thing would be sort of like how we experienced her speaking. Growing up, it was not cool to see your mother speak, but looking back, it was like really, really very impressive. Then I thought about like, what would you say? Like the fact that I'm speaking is already quite a nice, pleasant surprise. Thanks for the meds. It's like, what is there to say? I mean, we could stand, everybody here could tell a story for an hour or two, whether you had known my mother for 50 years or 40 years or 6 minutes, you could never not remember your interaction with her, whether you were, like has been said, like an important person or just a normal person or just any kind of person. Besides then the thinking about what to say, my mother, I'm sure you've all heard her speak, an expert at giving speeches. So it was never just about like what she'd say. Then I had to think, okay, it's how you say it. Then you sort of figure in your mind, okay, be calm. Thanks for the meds again. And then it's also like how much info do you, I mean, what do you say? Because my mother could speak, and people just were mesmerized by what she was saying. I mean, she could, like if you were interested in art or you were just a family member that had come for the free wine, she just kept everybody's attention. Once you figure that out, then you think, okay, like her tone was just, like it just flowed. I wrote down my notes. I mean, it's not the most sort of impressive looking compared to the essays that we've seen. And then she just embarrassed all of us and then speak in different languages with the same kind of perfection. You know, it'd be English, and then it'd be Afrikaans, and then she'd pop in some French. And it was really nice. So I think just, I mean, as a person, not as her son, her favorite child, firstborn, grandkids, sorry. No, okay. I don't have to say anything. I'm always there. Everybody else is there. Then I thought, maybe this is the easiest person that you could ever speak about, because you don't have to say anything. I mean, I can't say enough. Anyone who's met her, there's just so many stories and stuff. So I didn't write a lot of things. My final thing was, I think we all know how fortunate and blessed we were to have her in our lives. But she also felt how blessed she was that we were all in hers. So I think that's not going to be my last thing. It was quite weird when I came in here this morning, and my mom loved the gallery. I mean, half of our life was in the gallery. For those of you who don't know, we used to live next door, and we used to come into the gallery because the restaurant was here. A very nice salad back in the day. And I think for me, just as I don't know, it's like a weird thing. It's, if you look, I've never been in here and seen the walls with nothing on them. You know, so the gallery is a bit like us, where we have this emptiness now that hopefully we can fill with something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Zia. As I said at the beginning of my little introduction, Marilyn Martin was a very public figure, but she was also a very private person. And I want to thank you guys for giving us, sharing with us the very private, which I was fortunate to share as well. Also, to somebody like my friend Baylor, the very professional public figure that she was in many ways. And I want to assure you, Hermanus may not be the Hamptons, but I was also fortunate to be able to take over what Marilyn was planning for the Hermanus Fine Arts Festival. At a last minute, she was busy. I can't say that I chose what was going on the walls, but I just told Baylon as well that when I saw what was in the gallery, it just all came together in this. If I may publicize it a little bit, the exhibition is still on in Hermanus at the Fine Arts Gallery, and it's really worthwhile to seeing it. And Baylon, we've actually sold 4 works. That concludes the event for today, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, thank you very much for being here and coming along. You've heard many voices today talking about a most remarkable person. And please feel free to mingle and talk and find out and share stories when we conclude today's event. And finally, wil ek net ook dankie sê vir almal, en ek wil persoonlik dankie sê vir die gedagtes wat ek van Marilyn het, wat ek vir altyd sal hou. Die lag en giggel, die ernstige bekleierheid wat ons soms gehad het, was wonderlijke jare. Marilyn's family would like to thank the management, Bongani, thank you very much, staff of Museco, Museums of South Africa, which made this space available just as it was closing. Thank you very much. Of course, as I said earlier, these are the parquet floors that Marilyn probably treaded more than anywhere else in her entire life. To the Friends of the National Gallery, Philippa, thank you very much. We say thank you. Wonderful contribution that you made for this wonderful celebration, which we all thought had to happen, you know, and here we are. Thank you very much for that, Philippa. And of course, for all the participants to the tributes today. Thank you, everybody. And finally, also thanks, Balon, for SMAC's contribution today, and Joanne for the Kevin and Patricia Atkinson Trust for honoring Marilyn in this way with a contribution. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again for coming.